present For the Record.
Welcome back to For the Record. We are looking back over the year in politics, and luckily I have some help for me to do that. I'm joined by Matt Rothschild with the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign and Brandon Scholz with the Capital Group. Thank you guys so much for being here with me.
You bet. Thanks for having us.
So let's start off first with the election. I'll give you guys each just about a minute if you guys want to talk about how you think each party did in November. Matt, let's start with you.
Well, it was a great success for the Democrats here in Wisconsin and for progressives who were dying to get Donald Trump out of office and to bring the state back into the blue column for the Democrats in the presidential race was a crucial and inspiring victory for a lot of those folks. It was close, just like it was last time. I mean, 1 out of every 2 Wisconsinites essentially voted for Trump. But the Democrats managed to get 20,000 more votes, and that was a tremendous success. In the legislature, things didn't change too much. The Democrats lost a couple Senate seats, which was predictable, and they gained a couple seats in the Assembly, denying Robin Boss his fantasy of a veto-proof majority. So that was a victory also for the Democrats.
Okay, Brandon, what do you think?
Well, regardless of how much lipstick Matt wants to put on that result, it really wasn't what everybody expected. With the billions of dollars that were spent on this election and Matt's idea of public financing now down the drain because Democrats did an amazing job of raising money and outspending Republicans 7-1, the result really wasn't much. The presidential race was kind of the nugget. And 20,000 votes got to victory this time. Trump, 20,000 votes victory last time. 4 years from now, 20,000 votes is going to get somebody a win. So I think Wisconsin's always going to be that close. But after you go past the presidential race, which, wasn't much of a surprise, Democrats really struggled to produce great results.
Okay, so what should the parties do? What did they do well that they should continue, and what should they change? Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, certainly Democrats proved their mettle in their ability to raise money in this last election. And that likely is to continue. They now have a donor base that, not so much in Wisconsin, but across the country, saw some results, even though they lost seats in the House and didn't win the U.S. Senate majority. But still, that fundraising prowess is significant. Second, I think candidate recruitment for both sides. After that, it gets back to a function of how well can you run campaigns. And if Wisconsin has really closed the gap, we are now going to see close races forever in this state due to kind of our purple state status. It's going to be back to basics. Republicans have a lot of work to do, I think, with different segments of the voter base, certainly with women. I think with younger voters, that's going to have to be a target for them.
What do you think, Matt? Do you agree?
Well, I think the Democrats need to keep getting their base out like they did this time. I also think it's important, not just for Democrats, but for our society as a whole, that we take a little of the volume down on this toxic divide we have in this state, especially authoritarianism. There's a rising authoritarianism all across the country, but also in Wisconsin. And I think it's important for Democrats and progressives not just to talk to their base, but to talk to other people, their neighbors, family members, who may have voted for Trump, who they totally disagree with about Trump, as I do. But, we've got to have conversations. We can't just write people off. We can't write half the state of Wisconsin off.
So authoritarianism, you think both in Democrats and Republicans?
No, there's this white supremacist movement, this armed white supremacist movement that we saw in Michigan, for instance, and some training here in Wisconsin, which is horrifying. We had people like Representative Joe Sanfilippo said you should just have a do-over of this election because of those bogus charges about fraud. I mean, really, we're going to, and some members of the Supreme Court, too, willing to throw out tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of votes, or just destroy the whole election. I mean, that's not how democracy is supposed to work. And to the extent that a lot of people lined up behind that or kept quiet about that, I think that is a shame. I think it's disgraceful. And I hope people will come around to respecting our democracy and the way it's supposed to function.
What do you think, Brandon? Does that represent the Republican Party? And do you think that was a good move for so many Republicans to deny that Joe Biden had won?
First of all, to Matt's point about kind of what is harbored as he suggests maybe the Republican Party, I think you have to be careful with taking a small percentage of people who happen to get their faces on the news and append those issues, their positions, as representative of a larger group in America. That's just simply foolish. You can't do that. That's like me picking a very tiny segment of the Democrat Party, the far left wing, and saying that's what the whole party is about. So to be honest about it, you need to segment those people. They're there. You have to recognize them. You can't deny it. But to infer that that is the basis for the Republican Party up and down the ladder is just simply false. Again, what both parties have to do is, I think, Democrats are going to have to move past the kind of messaging that Matt just put out there that again, that's supposedly representative of the entire Republican Party. Republicans, I think, need to move off of this idea that they're going to change up the results of the election. And the challenges that have come post-election of fraud, there are things that the legislature, both parties in a bipartisan effort, can get together on and make some changes, because that's the proper place to do it. This last 30 days of filing a gazillion lawsuits wasn't going to get ultimately the changes that you need to fix it. It didn't satisfy the people that want to overturn the election because there's just not the evidence there to do it.
Well, I don't agree that there was some evidence of voter fraud. I don't think there was any. I also think, where were the Republicans in Wisconsin, the decent Republicans? Where were the Mitt Romneys of Wisconsin when Donald Trump was trying to invalidate an election? And I know Brandon doesn't feel that way about what Trump was doing, but I wanted to hear from, our elected officials in the Republican Party saying, this isn't kosher. I wanted to hear from Tommy Thompson. I wanted to hear from decent leaders in the Republican Party in Wisconsin to say, this is way, way, way out of bounds.
Other big things going on in 2020, of course, the coronavirus pandemic. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back, talk about the pandemic in Wisconsin.